Tyler, I want to dive back into a little bit more about, third-party entities that insurance companies have been engaging in the claims process, because you and I talked about this. It can be a little infuriating when you don't have somebody that you can stand across from and have a intelligent discussion to resolve a client's claim. And we've truly seen that insurance companies are bringing out more and more third-party entities to inspect claims, prepare reports, prepare opinions that then what we talked about, the desk adjuster, desk examiner relies upon, and we meet those people on site, right? And what have your experiences been meeting with them? Does it help the claims process? Does it hurt the claims process? Walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great question because I also like to be fair in any scenario, and it depends. So it depends on, hey, are we talking about a daily occurrence, or are we talking about some big hurricane event where there's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of claims that get filed overnight, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's a scenario where it's more likely to see somebody that's an actual third-party firm that's handling the entire claim, and that is a distinction that I think that we should make. And I think a lot of the insurance companies have moved towards, at least the field adjusters being an independent adjusting firm. But then you also have these scenarios where you'll have a third-party adjusting firm that's doing that on behalf of the insurance company. And to some degree, you may say, okay, well, with that type of influx of claims, we want to make sure that we can get to those claims, quicker. That's all good and well. I like the idea of that in theory, but in practicality, the way that I've seen it play out, over the years, as it's really started to shift towards that, is that, like we talked about earlier, even though it was an independent, adjuster, that was going out in the field with me, earlier in my career, they still had a lot of sway. And the insurance company that was still submitting that to, somebody that was working directly for the insurance company that, had the authority to make those decisions. Also, those folks, that were the decision makers, leading up to, maybe, Randy or, whoever their supervisor would have been. In those situations, I felt like they had really great knowledge of the industry. Mm-hmm. A lot of them had been field adjusters themselves. And so if we had a disagreement, or if we were, if they needed a little bit more clarity on what it was that we were claiming, when I'm providing my, additional documentation, we were having really good discussions about that. Mm-hmm. Hey, I'm glad you asked. Here's some additional photos. Here's some additional documentation to support, what it is that we're claiming. And we were able to have back and forth conversations and come to resolution. Mm-hmm. I've noticed that, the industry has really shifted more towards, having a completely third-party adjusting firm that's handling everything, right? So, yeah. And what that would mean to a homeowner is that, hey, so maybe you have this insurance company, XYZ, that could be any insurance company. Maybe you have that scenario. Well, it's not even that insurance company. You're not even dealing with any representative at any point, through the adjusting process. Now they've hired out a completely separate firm, to be the desk adjuster, the examiner as well. And in a lot of those instances, I'm realizing that the conversations that I was, higher level conversations about the damage, those folks aren't able to have those back and forth discussions.
Right.
And I'm not even talking about in an adversarial way at all. I'm talking about, basic building materials.
Right.
I was having a conversation with, one adjuster, and they kept referencing, shingle roofs for, a tile roof. And I'm thinking, hey, we're talking about very basic, material differences here, that have a big sway on the outcome of
absolutely
of the claim. I mean, it's a huge difference, and to not be able to have, any type of back and forth. How are we supposed to find resolution?
Right.
How are we supposed to come to an agreement? At that point, then it's just, me having this discussion with somebody that doesn't seem to have any industry knowledge. And then when it comes time to actually try to settle the claim, then it's them just saying, well, here's our number. Mm-hmm. Well, where's that number coming from? Mm-hmm. The client doesn't agree to that number. That we feel like we're way off. We don't feel like this actually indemnifies the client. Yeah. So what can be done? Well, I don't know. I don't have any authority. We don't even work for the insurance company. Yeah. I have to take this to my supervisor, and my supervisor doesn't even work for the insurance company. They have to take that to the actual insurance company and wait for approval, or for them to deny what we're requesting at that point. So not only can I not get to, the supervisor, the desk adjuster that I'm dealing with doesn't have the authority. They're taking that to the supervisor. I don't know who their supervisor is, and their supervisor doesn't even have the authority. They have to then take it to the insurance companies. Again, when we're talking about in practice, I understand, that there can be, in certain circumstances, extenuating circumstances, but at the same time, these things that sound nice, hey, we've got these firms that are going to help us expedite the process. They don't help us expedite the process at all. It slows it down because now we've got this chain of command that's unclear. You're dealing with people that don't have the authority to settle the claim, and quite frankly, and like I said, in a lot of those instances, I'm really questioning, how much experience they have, and whether that's intentional or not. And you go, I used to be able to, settle these claims. I used to be able to, have really great discussions with the desk adjuster, who had one extra level of authority to get to, and then they could get back to me and say, yes, this is approved or not. Awesome, we're done. I mean, if we're talking about expediting a claim, if we're talking about being advocates and helping the insurance company also, because again, a great benefit of having a public insurance adjuster, I can't tell you how many insurance company representatives that I've dealt with where they say, I've got all these folks that don't have anything, they don't have a clue about what the insurance claims process is. We're requesting this information and they don't know how to get it to us. Or they're saying, hey, we think that there are additional damages. Okay, great, no problem. I would love to help you supplement that. Help me substantiate it. But they don't know how to do that. Right? They're not using the same tools as we are. So I can't tell you how many times I've had an insurance company representative that says, hey, I'm actually really glad that you're here, working this file alongside me because this is making my job a lot easier. I have hundreds of other claims.
That's powerful.
That I'm dealing with where they don't have a clue what's going on with the claim process. You actually know this. We're speaking the same language. We're both trying to move this thing forward, and we're having discussions about, if there are any disagreements, then we're resolving those together also. And unfortunately, I do feel like that has really gone by the wayside where, now we're just getting these instances where there's so many layers to get to the decision maker that the person that I'm, tasked with dealing with, they don't have the authority. How do you get the claim resolved? They don't have the industry knowledge the way that those folks used to have that used to be in the field themselves, where we could have those great high-level conversations back and forth and work on behalf of the client. So I would feel like our job is more necessary than ever because I can't imagine doing that on your own and never being able to get to the decision maker period.
And what's interesting, there's actual statistics for the state of Florida on how long it takes on average for a claim to be resolved. The National Association of Insurance Commissioners actually puts that out, and Florida annually, at least for the last 2 years, by and far takes longer than any other state to pay a claim. And there are recent statutes that have brought it from 90 days to make a claim determination down to 60 days. But like we talked about, they've, in policies now, you see that they're putting that onus responsibility back on a policyholder to provide documentation. So you've got this really weird dynamic where, it's becoming more pressing for a policyholder to get engaged in their claim, but also harder to get answers to anything. And it's frustrating to see, and without having assistance to walk you through that, it's really hard to get a fair result and not quote unquote prejudice the insurance company in the process. There's a situation that I had recently. You're making me kind of think about a claim that I had where tornado claim, substantial damage to the property. We ended up getting policy limits payments for this client 4 times what the initial offer was from the insurance company. And when we submitted our documentation to the insurance company sent the same third-party adjuster out to reinspect the claim. And my first thought was, how's that going to make a difference? Because we already know this person's position, right? We're going to go out there, we're going to provide all the documentation we can, to show them the damages and get an accurate assessment of it. But this person already has their determination of it, so it's going to be interesting to see if they would see things from the proper perspective moving forward. And to add to that, the insurance company had also sent an engineer out on their behalf to inspect the loss. And when we met on site, I was going through the insurance company's engineering report, and there was one particular exterior load-bearing CBS wall that had been pushed in about 8 degrees from a massive impact, whether it be a tree or whatever, we're not exactly sure, but it had substantial damage. And so as we were walking the property, I pulled out the insurance company's engineering report, and we're standing in front of this wall, and I said, if you don't mind me asking, this was not in your original report for repair. I said, the insurance company's engineer has attested that this is damage. It's damage from this loss. It needs to be repaired, but it doesn't give a methodology for the repair. What is your methodology for repair? Let's have a discussion about that so that we make sure we're on the same page moving forward. And the response from the adjuster was, well, my company has protocols for how this repair is done. Fantastic. What are those protocols? Yeah. Right. Well, I'll get with our company and we'll review that and we'll take care of this. What does that mean, right? Let's talk about it. Are we throwing some shoring posts up here, knocking down some CBS, about 40 square feet, labor allowances? What is it going to take to repair this exterior load-bearing wall? Why can't we have an intelligent conversation about that right now so that when you write your report that's going to go to Randy one day,
Right. I
can have a conversation that is resolvable with Randy because we're on the same page now. And I feel like that's the disconnect you're talking about, where there's entities that feel like they're not really tied to the process because they're third party, right? That's not the actual adjuster on a claim a lot of the times now.
They can throw their hands up.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't have any authority. It's funny that you brought engineers into the discussion as well because similar situation. Was a hurricane also, and stemming from those tornadoes that spun off. So the hurricane that I was working was, you were talking about the tornadoes that spun off from that same kind of situation, and so the insurance company said, all right, well, we're going to send an engineer. That was actually prior to my involvement. The field adjuster said, I have to wait to write my report until we get the engineering report, and then I have to write whatever the engineer says. Interesting. Okay. Well, the engineer had stated unequivocally there was 0 wind damage to the roof whatsoever. Well, what was interesting about the report, though, was that there wasn't a single photo of the roof. So here's this engineering report, and that says there's 0 damage to the roof, which I found substantial damage to the roof. And actually, a different engineer had gone out and just saw all kinds of damage and notated it as well. And so, but it was interesting. There was not a single photo. So when I submitted that information to the desk adjuster, and I said, hey, I really feel like your field adjuster was hamstrung in this situation. They're saying they can't do anything about it, and you're saying, well, we have to side with the engineer. I said, okay, I understand, but can we have a discussion about the engineering report? Engineering report is detailing that there's 0 damage to the roof whatsoever, but there's also 0 evidence included in the report. There's hundreds of photos and not a single one on the roof. I'm thinking, can we have a discussion about that? And then
did they even get on the roof? Did they look at the roof? Yeah.
So I mean, it was a pretty clear question. So then I'm asking the desk adjuster, and the desk adjuster saying, well, I'm going to reach out to the engineer and see if they have photos. Well, I think it took us several weeks and I was following up with the desk adjuster and saying, hey, what are the next steps here? Have you heard from your engineer? Oh, I can't get a hold of the engineer. How long does it take to say, oh, did I forget to include some photos or not?
Right.
Come on. And so the desk adjuster is now telling me, hey, I can't move forward. My supervisor says that we have to stick with what the engineer says. The field adjuster says, no, I can't write anything, without this engineer. Well, this engineer doesn't work for the insurance company at all.
Right.
They're not even an adjuster.
Right. Yeah.
They got brought in, and so again,
and everybody's relying on this report of somebody they can't get a hold of.
Exactly. And there's this circular logic that's going around, and I'm just saying, hey, how do we push forward, through this? Clearly, we disagree with the engineering report, or can you at least substantiate, do you have any photos of the roof from the engineer at all? No. If you don't, can we agree that we can throw this out? Can you at least look at the documentation that I'm providing, where I've got hundreds of photos of the roof showing tons of damage to the roof? Can we have a discussion about that? And they're essentially saying, no, we can have 0 discussion about that. This is our protocol. How are we supposed to move forward then? And it's just going, we want to help you. The insurance company as well. Help us help you. We're all trying to, indemnify the client and move forward. And you're just going, well, this person said, that's our protocol.
Yeah.
Can't do anything about it.
Okay. So what's the key then here? What's the value add that a public adjuster brings that makes the difference in a claim from a mythical Randy just delaying this to infinity and beyond, and you actually being able to effectuate a settlement on behalf of your client?
Well, I think you lightly touched on it earlier, which is that there are state statutes, right? So there are timelines, that the insurance company, has, to make a claim determination. And so there are certain things that they may require to actually settle the claim. That's our job to work within those guidelines also and say, hey, we understand that there are certain obligations that the homeowner has. And so as representatives of the property owner or the homeowner, we want to check those boxes for you. We want to make sure that those, have been fulfilled on behalf of, the property owner who suffered this loss. But once we've done that, now it's back in your hands. We have an obligation to, provide an estimate that supports, the position on behalf of the property owner. Now that we've provided that to you within statutory timeframes, now it's your job to actually, go and re-inspect the loss and keep the claim moving forward and work through the supplement. And unfortunately, a lot of the times, like you're saying, hey, well, maybe the claim got reassigned. And so, this next person says, hey, I just got this claim. I don't know what happened. I'm going to need some time. I understand that. Again, we're dealing with humans, and I try to be understanding of that situation. But at the end of the day, you go, hey, look, you can change hands as many times, but you still have the same statutory obligation as well. So we're just trying to level the playing field. We're just trying to say, hey, we want to keep this fair. You're requiring this on behalf of the homeowner or the property owner, and we're just saying, hey, here's the the guidelines that are set forth for how we're supposed to make a decision and what the time frames are for that. So at that point, what we're simply doing is just documenting it. Hey, we've asked, we've provided this documentation. Now what we're asking for in return is for you to make a determination. We haven't heard from you. You have this much time to be able to do that. Otherwise, we have to find alternative means of resolution. We have to keep the ball rolling at some point. Are you going to help us? Are you going to work with us to indemnify this client or not? And I can't imagine being a property owner that hasn't gone through that before or doesn't know what those guidelines are, doing this on their own and kind of going, oh, well, I guess the clock started all over again just because we're on our third or fourth adjuster.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
That clock doesn't start over.
Right.
Hey, do we want to, be a little patient with that person and try to give them the information that they need to catch up to speed? Sure, I'm happy to do that as long as you're working within statutory timeframes. It does not change though. That their obligations don't change either. So our job is to hold their feet to the fire and just say, hey, look, we're playing within the bounds here, and we're just simply asking you to play within the same guidelines that have been set for everybody. All we're asking for, and we're going to document that in a way that, hey, if you drop the ball, then we got to hold you accountable as well. The client deserves, to have somebody saying, hey, look, we can't just kick the can indefinitely.
Right.
There has to be, a point of resolution, and are we working towards that or not?
Yeah. To that same point, Tyler, I think it's really important that one of the ways that insurance companies can kind of get out of responding to a policyholder is if they're not, like we talked about, complying with their duties after loss and not providing substantial documentation to require the insurance company to respond, because those statutes sometimes are predicated on the policyholder actually taking action. And we've seen even recently a case law come out that basically stated that because the policyholder had responded to a request for documentation from an insurance company, but not substantially enough, that the insurance company was able to deny payment of their claim. Not that the claim in and of itself wasn't valid, but that the response from the policyholder for providing documentation after the loss occurred was not sufficient enough. So that's pretty impactful too, I think, that it's multifaceted, and going it alone now and just filing a claim and hoping for the best to happen would you agree that that's really kind of setting yourself up for failure in this modern claims environment?
Yeah, and what's really difficult about that, though, is that when you look at the marketing, there's so much marketing for insurance companies that give you this warm and fuzzy feeling that, hey, this person, this entity, has my back. This person, without going into, I think everybody kind of knows the little jingles and the slogans and the things, and they make you feel like, hey, I have somebody that's looking after me in the event that something catastrophic happens that, was sudden and accidental, that just completely altered my life and my home and my ability to, have a roof over, my children's heads or whatever the case may be. And so, yeah, I think that, the marketing has done a fantastic job of making people think, I don't have to do anything. This person's just going to magically appear. This person's going to show up, and they're going to take care of everything for me. And that's not the case.
Right.
And exactly what you're talking about. Now there's case law, and now there's precedent for that, of saying, hey, tucked in your policy, which, the first thing that we do is ask for the policy.
Absolutely.
And I cannot tell you how hard it is. It usually takes about three tries of me asking the property owner to get something from their agent or from their insurance company, and they usually come back with a policy declaration page, or maybe some renewal forms
Right,
from the next year. Here's some things that changed, but it's not everything that you're talking about.
Yeah.
What you're talking about, those duties after the loss are tucked into another section of that policy that hasn't been provided to them, or they can't find it. And so even when we go to the insurance company and request it, hey, it's a struggle to get that, and then to sift through that. So, I'm really sympathetic to the property owners and going, this is not what they do on a daily basis. This may be the only time in their entire lives that they have to go through this, and now the expectation is on them. It went from all this marketing saying, hey, I've got your back, I'm going to take care of everything for you, to, no, actually you have to provide this, and we're not even going to tell you about it. It's tucked in your policy, 40 pages down the line. Or, I can't tell you how many times that, hey, now somebody's brought me in to represent them, and, I'm asking for, any and all documentation that the insurance company has sent them at that point, because I need to know, hey, have they made a request for information? The insurance company absolutely has that right, to request that information that may help them, make a determination, no problem. But it often is kind of tucked into these, back pages where, ooh, all of a sudden, here's a couple of questions, and the property owner didn't even see it. Hey, it may be several pages into this thing that looks like a standard form. They didn't even see that there was a request for the information. I have to go find that.
Right.
I have to know what I'm looking for, and then go, hey, have you responded to this or not? No? Well, we actually have to work to respond to that.
Right.
If we don't, then they have a right to say, hey, we can't come to a resolution on your claim. We can't work with you until this thing has been resolved. So again, it's a tough scenario for a property owner that has been kind of sold. I don't even want to say illusion, but again, the marketing is quite clear. We've got your back.
Yeah.
We're going to handle this for you.
Yeah.
We're going to show up.
Yeah.
In practicality,
it's not always the case.
In the field,
Yeah.
What we're seeing is, they kind of get left hanging and don't even realize what those responsibilities are.
Right.
And it's dragging out their claim, and they don't even know why.
Yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah. Tyler, thank you for joining us today on the Adjusters Roundtable. The information you provided was super impactful. I know it's going to be very helpful to people out there who might be going through this claims process, so thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. Hey, everybody that's out there, please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again.